Okay, here's one about Melanesians and something that happened recently. I thought about doing one that even shows genetics and just reading another boring wiki article straightforward to you with a couple of pics. But I thought this would work a little bit better and maybe show you a little bit more culture of it. And something I could blend into this a little bit better is a story that I have that I guess I'll start out with. In fact, the guy on the right looks kind of familiar to me, but he also looks a little bit like a picture that was taken of a guy that used to bring in fish to a distributor that I used to get fish from in Solomon Islands. And a lot of people, if you've seen my videos, know that I used to heavily be into it, and I used to have special permits to get rare corals and fish from around the world. It's hooked up to a thing called CITES. It's the Continental International Trade of Endangered Species. And it's the same people that if you're going to ship a tiger to a zoo or anything along that line, that you do. And they have control over how many corals and fish come out and so on. And what these people do actually is they try to find the breeding grounds, and then they won't let you fish in the breeding grounds because you'll kind of try to ruin it. And they set limits per quarter that they can get of certain types of fish and corals and so on like that. Anyhow, when this was just a burgeoning hobby and I got into it deep, a lot of sites started opening up across Indonesia and so on, and Philippines, and then it became in Solomon Islands, and I got hooked up through one of the two that was there. Eventually it became 3 and 4. Then we got one of them to start doing mariculturing of corals as we started to bring corals in, and got that. And that turned into 5, 6, or 8 now, and there's Vanuatu, where these people are. It's just kind of south of there, and it's really, if you're on the northeast coast of Australia, up there where Queensland and so on and Great Barrier Reef is at, and you were to go northeast, you'd run into this island set which contains Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, and then up above there's Fiji and so on. But directly left of it there, you'd run actually into Irian Jaya, or as we know, New Guinea today. These people look somewhat like black people, probably to the common person that doesn't know of it, but even in the wiki article it explains their genetics, and they're really an island people, much like the Australian Aborigines, but Australians are different, and they've been separated for a period of time, and there's this thing called the Cook's Line, and these other lines, they realized that people and animals had trouble going across, and they didn't understand it at a point for a while there. But what truly ended up being the effect was at the last ice age, the whole center of this whole area and attached was one big island instead of a bunch of islands, or Micronesia being its bunch of islands. A lot of those were connected too, but this is all connected together. In fact, it's a great place for corals and diving, all kinds of things. The people live off fishing, as well as having other things going on in the major type of cities. And the center of this area is called New Georgia, and it's really kind of the central area between all the islands, and pardon my hand here, but they kind of run at an angle, and Irian Jaya would be right over the left and seeing it there, and then down that way would, but it's over 800 miles away, is well, first there's New Caledonia, and then then the island past that that's huge is Australia, we're all familiar with. But they call this New Georgia, or the New Georgia Sound or Strait that runs through there. I think they call it a sound, even though sounds are usually aren't this big. The area is just huge, and the whole area in between it is shallow enough for diving and so on. And so actually during the last ice age it would have been all connected. So it seems to make an easy connection how these people got out onto those islands, but then they've been trapped there. and separated and different for about 10,000 years, but there was a variation on themes in this island that wasn't necessarily ever the slight variation that got to Australia. So it's kind of cool if you go through it, and to talk to these people, you can kind of hear an accent in them, but that's based on local dialects. In fact, when I would talk to this guy, you'd hear him, he made the people there speak English. It's one of the things they were trying to do. And because they had to deal with a lot of people in the public and everything, and it's the lingua franca getting to be. It was a little bit broken for a lot of the people there, and for himself somewhat. And but what was cool is every once in a while when things got out of hand, you'd hear him break into the island dialect and go off. It always sounded like they were getting into a fight and an argument, but it really wasn't that. In fact, he had a few times he got back on the phone and tried to tell me that that wasn't a fight. One time that comes to mind was one thing that he had told the guy to do, and then it had done something wrong. I don't want to go into it too heavily, but at the end of the big argument, talking in island speak, he said it loud and almost like he was aiming his voice at the phone. He told me to do it. Thought it was funny. Anyhow, he got to the point real quick. I got to the point of him being able to send me pictures, because we got an email contact going on, and I got him to where he was making a list and all that for me. And after doing this a few times, he had the incorrect names of some of the fish and Latin names and so on like that were misspelled and so on, and this stuff had to be just about right. In fact, we had an instance where they took a couple of fish away from us because it wasn't labeled correctly, and the guys noticed it all the way at Singapore. And so they yanked it out of the box. That's one of the areas that they have that customs is checking out what comes through and stuff, and you never know whether they're going to choose you or not. But of course, if you have some fish that's all incorrectly labeled, and they're like, what the hell is this? And they probably already knew this guy was sending a bunch of fish through, and they wanted to straighten things out so everybody knew what everybody was doing, and so on. It seemed like it was they're being overly tough on you, but really it's just ensuring that what is this? You're using some island name for a fish that we have an atlas for that's different. In fact, over a period of time, I took some of his styrofoam dills and sent him back an atlas and a couple of fish books and a coral book and a dive guide that had a bunch of corals and fish in it, and had circled a whole bunch of pictures and things in there that I knew were from there locally. And he had people trying to get them. One fish I knew was common for there was a type of fox face. Now they're somewhat venomous spined or whatever, but it's you have to really grab a hold of them, and it's so if a fish tries to eat them that it coughs it back out or does whatever and remembers not to get stung by that bee again. It's not as bad as a lionfish or something like that. I did a video about lionfish. I don't know, I've done a bunch of videos about things like that and astronomy thoughts and things that I really haven't put out because it's just not in line with everything. This will eventually get to that, but I guess in the story that I was telling you here, this guy had a fish guy that he caught it with, and his American name was Danny. And really, because of the accent, I think it was Donnie. But it sounded like Danny. So, in that effect, he sent me pictures of fish sometimes, if it needed to be, and so on. And once we got corals going on, he had to do that, and I would tell him which ones I want. And, off of just some bland pictures that he took of the shop, I was able to help him out a whole lot, where he had plumbing going in the first place and so on. And this guy was able to get fresh ocean water not too far away, and then take it and bring it to himself and do water changes there rather than using fake salt water. But he also had fake salt water made up, and everybody had 5-gallon buckets, and it looks like a 5-gallon bucket of paint or whatever that you'd get at Home Depot and so on. You get these 5-gallon buckets. They're kind of an orange color around here at Home Depot, so he give these people that are some of these extra fish catchers, and by this time they already had people that used to do their living off of catching fish to eat, but had to compete with too many other people, and so were able to go in other places. And because they could snorkel and swim real good, some of these guys hold their breath a couple of minutes and so on, chase down fish, throw a net out, wrangle them up to a point, then start circling that net and get in there and catch the fish, put them in these buckets, and take them back to them. They made a better living than people trying to fight each other and tangle up fishing lines and get in arguments all day about the best fishing spots. So it was nice to see that he had these people going but at one time he sent me a picture. And that picture was of a guy that he said, "Here's Danny I get these fish from." He looked kind of like the dude on the right, but he didn't have any beard on him. In fact, this could be the two guys that we were talking about. The one on the left is older that I was talking to and so on, and the one on there, although the one on the left doesn't look like, that guy looks more like Cheech and Chong a little bit, but he's, of course, dark-skinned and so on, but this guy didn't look like that. He had a slender face and older, but the guy on the right looked like Danny, and somewhat. But he called him a kid. But whenever I first got the picture of him, he said he had a picture of him sitting there, and he had a straw hat on that looked like it was made out of the tree bush that was in the background, the grass right here. On his head, a straw hat, but and he had a 5-gallon bucket in his hand, and like gonna go back after he'd caught some fish and everything. And he sent me, and he goes, I was making a joke, and he said that, he had natives catching me the fish and stuff, and I go, what do they do, get in a dugout canoe and, go out there and then snorkel around or whatever? And he was just like, yeah. And like, I was like, do-doonch, no, there's no laugh and everything, and it just fell dead, and it was like, wow, so seriously. So the other picture of Danny was him in his dugout canoe going off from the shore where the other fish people were, and there are boats and everything there, but there's a few dugout canoes that are right there pulled up, and he's out in the water, must have been 20 or 30 foot away, kind of looking back, standing up in this dugout canoe. Couldn't have been 20 foot long, might have held 3 or 4 people, but you'd be surprised what they could put in there and doing stuff. Anyhow, I was able to send him a fish atlas and these others that I had a bunch of fish in, and that way he was able to use it to make the list correct and make it correct for CITES and put all the stuff through, which helped us out and helped us all out a lot, and talk to him about ways of bagging these fish that made them get here more alive, and how to prep the water preemptively so you didn't have them shocked in any way whenever you try to ship him, because he was trying to make up new water and ship them in that and shock them, and no, you might put them in the water there, and then the water that's missing, put some of that new water in there and be that slight bit in there, but you wouldn't shock them. Things like that I had to deal with, believe it or not. But in fact, you talk about how long a fish has to be in a bag. So imagine this: they have to bag them up and get it ready into an airport, and we had to make sure that after finding a couple of times out real quick, we find that we had to have it at this certain destination by a certain time to be able to make connecting flights. We basically had to have it to Singapore by a certain time, or the whole thing was null and dry. And so the destination thing that it made was, well, this guy, believe it or not, lived near a town called Riri, but it's on the coast. But then this is on the major island that's near there. And if you've ever heard of the Battle of Guadalcanal and all that, this is Solomon Islands, this was there. And the major rounder island that's there is called Honiara, and had to ship it out of there. But it seemed like the flight connectives to explain, and I had to explain customers too, how these fish are incredible, how they make it all this way, because people don't think about this. They were bagged up, they were caught within a couple of days to a week and kept in their facility with this water running in a fake environment, but they don't feed them so they don't crap in the bags, right? Because that could be real bad. That's another thing I had to explain to these people. I'll try to get them eating whenever you get here, and I know it's bad that you go, but fish can last a little bit longer. God made fish a little different. That's why he said you could eat them on Friday, but let's not go there. He also said it's because that fish don't have any feelings. But that's not true either. So, they would have to bag these fish up and then get them all in styrofoam so they wouldn't change temperature very much, and they would really bag these things up well, seal them all up in boxes, and then bring them to the airport, and as cargo it got shipped, and it would go from Honiara to Singapore, from Singapore to Bangladesh, India, catch a connective flight, which is same plane flight, which is what we were looking for, because there was a run here that you could go Singapore all the way out if you did it right. Follow me. This is the flight you had to catch, otherwise you were kind of screwed, and the fish got here almost 12 hours later because of logistics. So it hit Bangladesh, India, then it went to Heathrow Airport in London, to Newark, New Jersey, which is one of the hubs in America that you can bring across stuff like this, and you had to get clocked in and then shot down to me in Dallas. Very rarely did it ever stay on same plane flight, and it really wasn't a connective that ever I got a connective same plane flight from there that was in Dallas. Although it went from there to Atlanta and then back across the sea, and so I could get it dumped off at Atlanta and then grab a Southwest flight or Delta out of there and have it shipped all the way over to me to Dallas. Then I would be up there to pick them up no matter what time it was, even in the middle of the night, unless it was real late, and I'd grab them first thing in the morning. They have to go through customs, blah, 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 and then I had to take them back to the shop and then acclimate them in slowly, minimizing their water and maximizing slowly my water, and get them in and stuff, fish and corals from around the world. In fact, that was the hell of a flight that you used to have to go through from these people. Whenever you did it Bali, it was really just a short jump from Bali to Jakarta, and then it's the same flight. One of the destinations of Philippines was the same way, but actually we would try to go another way. Anytime you try to bounce it off Hawaii and so on, it's a lot more expensive, and LA, of course, and coming through, and then all the way across America. I know there was something else about Danny I wanted to say, but let's just get into this. These people are very nice people from all that I met. I didn't have any problems or issues with them whatsoever. You may have noticed that they're holding these pictures up, and those with keen eyes, or if your screen's big enough to get you a good look at it, you might notice that's Prince Phillip. In the middle of the picture on the left, with a bunch of locals there that are all dressed up, and then on the middle of the right here with apparently a group that had come to the island, and they sent him back a picture about it. And Prince Phillip was kind of enamored on this island in a strange way. One of the first times I heard about this was like in the 80s, and it was in a video that somebody had made about cargo cults and so on. And then I saw another one that made a reference to that, but it showed a different set of people on another island that had, from the exact same type of situation, had developed a cargo cult situation. They were making fake planes out of bamboo and had a runway set up for them. So if they'd come back, because whenever they came in the first place, they left them some supplies and some cool stuff they never thought. And they were like sky people that came, right? And this is, out there in lingering islands, and planes even rarely fly over in the first place. So let's look into this instance here. It's known as the Prince Phillip movement. Pacific tribe mourns loss of a living deity. The death of Prince Phillip has brought sorrow to people throughout the United Kingdom. Surprisingly, those feelings of loss and sadness are even shared by people living on the opposite side of the globe. On one tiny island that belongs to the Pacific island nation of Vanuatu, the Vanuatu people of Tanna Islands have been worshippers of the Prince Phillip movement since the mid-1970s. While Prince Phillip was respected as a man of honor and dignity in his homeland, in the villages of Yohanan and Yakel on the island of Tanna, he was revered as the living embodiment or avatar of an exalted spiritual being. He was actually a god. For this reason, the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh last week, which this came out in April of 2021, has been a movement for the Prince Phillip movement of Tanna Island in Vanuatu. So it's been a big moment for him. For reasons that remain a little obscure, the villagers were convinced that the Duke of Edinburgh was a recycled descendant of a very powerful spirit or god that lives on one of their mountains, explains Kirk Huffman. He's a British anthropologist who has spent more than 4 decades or 40 years living and working in Vanuatu. I thought of something else I'd say. Maybe it'll come to it again later. Here we go. Vanuatu has been independent since 1980, but for most of the 20th century it was a territory under the nominal and shared political control of France and Britain. And in 1974, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip paid a visit to the island nation, then known as the New Hebrides, and the prince conferred with village leaders from Yohanan at that time. That's where we get all the new everything, and it's not like they couldn't make up something, they just kept putting in new, like New Caledonia. Like you find New York, New Jersey. Well, there's a York, there's a Jersey. So, hence the names. Are calling it New Georgia Sound, but that's actually not off Britain at all. That's from a place that used to be long ago, which you can see about in my other videos. Georgia's a place that's over in the Near East, near the Caucasus Mountains up in Anatolia area, in modern-day Turkey. It has to do with the people of the Golden Fleece and so on too. But so the villagers' belief about Prince Philip's true identity did not originate as a result of this visit, though. But the prince's physical appearance in their midst undoubtedly reinforced those beliefs and helped guarantee the Prince Philip movement would remain a vital force on the island of Tanna in the years to come. Here it said, the connection between the people on the island of Tanna and the English people is very strong, said the village elder, Chief Yapa, in a statement issued after he received news of the prince's passing. We're sending condolence messages to the royal family and the people of England. Over the next few weeks, the people of Yohanan and Yakel will be holding a series of ceremonies and ritual celebrations to honor Prince Philip's memory and acknowledge the profound effect he had on their lives. Here are statues that are set up. I don't know which one Prince Philip is supposed to be or if he's supposed to be. But those are also dug out in a way. In the spiritual lore of the people of Tanna Island, there's a story of a mountain spirit that descends to earth in human form. And this is the spiritual basis of the Prince Philip movement. Well, you see, somebody came a long time ago in an airplane, and that started the whole thing off, but we'll get there eventually. I hope this doesn't go into a part 2. If it does, it's in the top left-hand corner, but it'll be at 45 minutes. Let's see if we can get there. So what are the mythological origins of the Prince Philip movement? In the spiritual lore of the people of Yohanan and Yakel, there's a story told of the son of a mountain spirit who comes to earth in human form, like we were saying, and after traveling across the ocean, he meets and marries a powerful and influential woman. And together the two of them devote their lives to achieving peace and teaching respect for traditional ways of living. Of course, in a modern day, people that are outside the loop and distracted and retaught by media would probably all think that colonization was a bad thing, but every time that it went on, every single place, it was a very welcomed thing. You can imagine somebody of this level with all of their gadgets and accoutrements. Seemed like some type of god. He had all these neato things. So if there are all kinds of different people on this earth, to them, this has got to be one of those dudes, man. Hey, right? But there's supposed to be a powerful woman involved, and of course, his son was married to the queen. So in their eyes, he was the king father. In fact, in Americans' eyes, the way it works out, even though she's a queen, that dude's the king. I know it's the Prince of Edinburgh and, the Duke and, whatever, yeah. Still, we look at it as being, well, that's the king, but it's a matriarchy, so that's fine. I don't know how y'all see it over there. I've got a few people that watch my vids from over there. Let me know if I have offended in any way, or is that too far out of line? But they had a way, see, these people, they were able to keep a lot of their ways. In fact, you can see it whenever you had that opening video thing there. They haven't been stripped of their ways. There are people that wanted to, like in South Africa and so on, that wanted to badly. And most people do, given the opportunity. I mean, hey, airplanes and spaceman here versus a dugout canoe, perhaps. So it becomes something that they want to have happen, but we've been able to stop it after we made the initial mistake, if you will. And so we've left people alone, like in Erie and Jaya. There's still headhunters up loose. There's still these islanders here which really have rarely, if seen, a white man and so on. And we've let them keep their ways, but then just the effect of these people coming in any way could, of course, spread disease and things like that you could think of, but also, more importantly, just that effect. And telling stories that he had a flashlight that was like a magic torch and stuff like this can lead all of a sudden to a myriad of different things that happens in that culture that wouldn't have happened before. And while we would probably see that all of that is for the better, and one day they're going to have to realize what those flying metal birds are about, right? Things like that. There's still the idea that it's impinged upon no matter what, and they start questing for the ability to do things, just like the Caucasians made up ideals of what their gods could do, and then they sought to do them. And of course, a lot of those have come to fruition now in the modern day space age. In fact, if you were to take somebody that had all the things of a modern day and teleport it back, 3500 BC, and go through that idea, you could pretty much pull it off. Wouldn't be too hard unless somebody tried to kill you, and then you'd be martyred, and it would still be the situation. So once his mission was complete, the son of the spirit would be free to return to the islands and to his people, where his presence would continue to bring good fortune. This legend became the basis of the Prince Phillip movement. And so they said, hey, he showed up. They knew about him. Everybody was talking about him before and everything, so they had apparently seen him, right? But then he came back and he was old, so they're like, that goes with it too. Just like when Quetzalcoatl happened into the Native Americans and so on like that. But so here's a good picture of the guy here. Blue-eyed. Let me see if I can get that out of the way. This was him probably about the time. I don't know if it has the date onto it here, but as the father of the husband of the queen. Is that right? So, yeah, just Duke of Edinburgh, they don't tell. Prince Phillip movement was born in the late 1950s or early 1960s when the villagers of Tanna became convinced that Prince Phillip, around the other side of the world, represented the fulfillment of the mountain spirit prophecy. There was a strange connection here, but it wasn't too long after World War II. In general, the English were more disposed to the granting of the New Hebrides and its freedom and independence than the French were, and consequently English leaders may have been viewed more favorably by the people as a whole during the late colonial period. Whatever the origin of the villagers' belief that they were spiritually and metaphysically connected to Prince Philip, and they were convinced of this righteousness of his intentions. As their holy messenger, this Duke of Edinburgh's purpose was to literally plant the seed of Tanna custom, or traditional Melanesian culture and beliefs, at the heart of the commonwealth and the empire of the place, said journalist Dan McGarry, the media director of Vanuatu Daily Post. It is a hero's journey, a person who sets off on a quest and literally wins the princess and the kingdom. So they've got this whole mythology built onto it now. It's amazing. Doesn't take too long before you can turn something weird into a myth. But there's something extremely similar to a people that was not, if not attached to these people earlier, we'll talk about in a moment. At the height of its popularity, the Prince Philip movement had thousands of followers within Tanna, and the numbers are lower now, but the movement still persists, and there has been recent talk amongst its followers of starting a new political party with the prince as its eternal patron. You can see how somebody can deify somebody and then turn it into things, and then people of great of old, even to the Caucasians who were heralding civilization, they had that brought about their mythology. So understanding and learning about something like this shows a kind of a fruition of type things, but it shows you whenever it happens, and to people that are not as advanced, how a cargo cult situation can happen, leading to all kinds of beliefs, which later, like a fish story, knock on wood, can end up getting taken out of hand in context, to the point that, cargo cults, the John Frum movement, came first. Despite the prominence of the person upon whom it was focused, the Prince Philip movement is not the largest or most influential grassroots religious sect in Vanuatu itself. That distinction belongs to the John Frum movement, which has first introduced the idea of an outside savior or redeemer to the people of Vanuatu in the late 1930s or early 40s. So here we have something leading into World War II, where these people were flying back and forth through, and this led to it somewhat. Here's the John Frum's flag, which strangely looks like an American flag, a Red Cross flag in a way, and then their flag, which I'm told they were told to fly theirs the highest whenever they were trying to do it in a different way. The three flags of the John Frum movement, a cargo cult that dates back to the early 1930s. It's a predecessor to this other one, Prince Philip. At various times, Frum has been alternatively identified as an American World War II era serviceman. Many were stationed in the New Hebrides, so this cargo cult could have happened from him. An island native named Mavui, who assumed the alias John Frum as his name, or a spirit being that manifested during a kava drinking session. Regardless of his origins, followers of the John Frum movement believed he would return to the islands at a future date, showing gifts and other blessings to the people who had believed in his message and his goodness. You see, what happened here They're going to be vague about it and not be sure, but let me just go ahead and give you a vague picture of what went on and then how it turned into this myth that we're having here. John Frum came over on a plane over those mountains. Maybe he had to fix his airplane or God knows what, but he ended up landing there. And he got his thing fixed, but he had supplies. And he told the people, trying to make sure he wouldn't get killed or anything, right? Told the people that he had this princess and he was going to have to go in the airplane to this faraway place and get the princess back in America. Far, far away, and everything. He was going to get this princess, but he would return. They just let him go, and all this stuff would happen. And they bring him little stuff now, but hell, he just met you now, and now that I know you're here, I can bring you a lot of stuff. Which may have happened more than once. But then right after he left, it became this thing within months, within years. It became a mythology, and then within a generation, which is the timeline we're looking at easily here, it became something totally different, didn't it? This movement and the Prince Phillip movement are examples of cargo cults, millenarian beliefs in which adherents perform rituals that they believe will cause a more technological advanced society to deliver goods to them. Well, it's not just that, but yeah, that's what happened. So they hope they come back because of this, but there's so much more done with it, and they think they're deities and they want them to come back, and they feel like they've almost done something wrong. If they don't, they can talk themselves into all kinds of beliefs. These cults were first described in Melanesia in the wake of contact with Allied military forces during the Second World War. While not quite as large as it once was, the John Frum movement has continued to exert an effect on island affairs, both as a religious group and a political party, the latter of which has been in existence more than 60 years. So here's an idea that I have, and I think I got this from the oldest one of these that I ever saw about cargo cults, and it mentioned John Frum. You see, John Frum said something else after Frum, and they have forgotten it over time, and perhaps it was not understandable or not easily pronounceable in their native tongues especially. But he was John from San Francisco, or John from St. Louis, or John from America, perhaps. John from somewhere, hooked up with the Red Cross, it looked like. So he had supplies on him too, which was great. But it helps bring about cargo cults. So other headlines you'll find here was this man holding it, the British flag wrapped around him, and he's holding pictures and portraits that he has up of him. He's a deified guy. They tell you he's a great hunter and so on. Prince Phillip religion, the island that worships Prince Phillip as a god. So you can see how cargo cults get into a way and out of a situation. And so you either continue that, which is colonization, or you leave them alone, and then they end up developing a cult where they think you left them alone and they did something wrong, or so on. So it's best to have as little contact as possible, but at the same time, when things like this originally happened, what can you do? And then again, we had to have this island hop here to be able to work out World War II. So the Prince Phillip movement can perhaps be seen as an offshoot or derivative of the John Frum movement, or a second coming, if you will, knock on wood. While Frum himself seems to have been a mythical figure, Prince Phillip was obviously very real and could therefore personify the archetype of the redemptive figure that the people of Vanuatu craved. This desire for a savior or redeemer may have been triggered by the sense of repression people felt while Vanuatu was under European control, but even after the colonial era ended, and independence was achieved, these vibrant and inspiring movements obviously continue to bring meaning and purpose to the lives of those who embrace them. Well, oddly, it wasn't a repression or things that just gone there. I mean, they were obviously brought enough things, they turned them into a god. So it's funny how you might look at it in Western eyes, but if you could step out yourself for a minute and look at it under these primitive island people's eyes for a moment, well, pow. You know, it's like Castaway, Robinson Crusoe. Well, not actually. Robinson Crusoe was a semi-advanced people here that got on and had to live as a primitive, like Castaway or something. It's not the same either. Is the Prince Charles movement next? Well, after Prince Philip's Vanuatu's visit in 1974, letters and photos were exchanged during one of the treasured images that shows the prince carrying a traditional war club known as the Nal Nal, which the people of Tana had given him as a present. Probably should be him as a present. It was often said that the prince would return to Vanuatu again once his mission were complete, bearing gifts and rewards that would bear testaments to his successes and dedication to his people. After the whole thing with the princess, right? Who was going to become a queen and all of that, right? Well, so whenever this guy showed up and his son is hooked up to it and there's a queen, that would have to be the king father. We are so sad that he will not come now, said movement follower Joe Ketu during an interview with the Daily Mail, but we have already begun to see some of his promises coming true because roads are being built and medical facilities are being built. You see, so how are we supposed to look in a modern day when everybody's trying to hate the white man for being the herald of civilization everywhere, whenever everywhere is craving it? In fact, if they don't get enough of it, they try to move in with you. Seriously, just to be honest. Maybe we shouldn't go there. Let's continue. Who's this? Well, that's Prince Charles. Picture from a couple of years ago, perhaps. Looking good. Prince Charles is the son of Prince Philip, is expected to take over the British throne by the islanders of Tana, Vanuatu. I think that's probably a local thing. They don't understand how it works and that it's really a matriarchy and it's supposed to go to a woman. Otherwise, when he married her and became the king, then he'd take over everything of it. It wasn't supposed to go that way. He's still Prince Charles. See, that's the thing Americans kind of get a freak out on. They're like, well, so you married a queen, so you're, is it what? But anyhow, so we've always looked at it as being the king, even though it's a matriarchal society, and work it that way, or at least I personally do. Therefore, his father would be the king father. Even though the prince will not be returning to Tana in physical form, followers of the movement are pleased to know that his spirit has begun to set free and will now be able to return to its spiritual home, according to Huffman. Despite the death of its inspiration, Prince Charles' movement will live on, with Prince Charles most likely anointed as his father's successor. We have hope that before he died, Prince Philip told Prince Charles and all the rest of his family to look after us. Yes, I'm sure that's something he would have done, Ketu said. Prince Charles visited Vanuatu in 2018. He was warmly welcomed as a representative of the village of Yokanan at that time, and they spoke about the movement that had elevated his father to such a lofty and unique position. That movement could soon do the same for Prince Charles if he ascends to the British throne. Well, of course, I don't think that's working, and that's what I said, so I don't think it works that way. In fact, it's amazing that his father lived as long as he did, but there isn't that many more years before we're probably looking at Princess Di's children and stuff. You could probably see him choosing between that one, whether it's the ginger or the ball-headed one. And yeah, I don't want to even go there right now. Any guys, like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, I made it just under 45, so let's get back up here to that original picture. Boom, 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 boom. And here